the show that helps you and your business to thrive, not just survive. Tune in each week as Jane connects with guests in the wellness, business and publishing worlds, bringing you the most up-to-date training, techniques, healing and guidance for growth, mindset and motivation. Each session includes a magical guided meditation led by Jane or one of her special guests. Here's your host, Jane Scanlan. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Stay Sane with Jane. Today we're going to be talking to Kim Julien, and we're going to be delving into that question of or it's almost an old adage of find a job you love and you'll never work a day of your life. So is that true? Does that ring true to you or not? So for Kim, and we're going to go into much more detail about this, but she has a passion still. And then she created a business out of it because perhaps she was almost pushed a little bit into what she should be doing by other people. She grew this business, and then the passion, it almost kind of suffocated the passion. So does this ring true for you or not? Find a job you love and you'll never do a day's work in your life. Hello, Kim.
Hi, Jane. Hi, everybody.
So nice to have you on the show. And also now another local, another Bournemouth lass now, or Southbourne, we're both in. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'd love to. So I went the very traditional grammar school, university route and did law. And that started me on the train track that I stuck on for 30 plus years. So I was a successful lawyer, still am a successful lawyer, although, you know, you don't always feel that at the time when you're going through the grind. And there is that imposter syndrome that does affect a lot of professionals, not just women, but particularly women. So my career was as a solicitor, advising clients. I did a lot with marketing, business development, and had a very, very busy job, ended up as a head of in-house legal for a national firm, 2,500 employees, 17 offices. I stepped off when I felt I was at the top of my game, really, because I'd been a hero or a zero for a lot of my professional life. I was a hero at that point and thought, I know which way it's going to go because it's definitely going to go down. It's a cycle. So I stepped off without a plan. The opportunity arose and I took what I described as early retirement. I absolutely hated the word retirement. And I just didn't have a plan, which is probably one of the pieces of advice to talk to on this.
We'll definitely get on to that.
Have a plan. I didn't have a plan, but as it has turned out, you know, maybe there was one. Maybe the universe had a plan for me.
Yes. So by this point, you'd already had your family, hadn't you?
Yeah,
you've got your home.
So home mortgage was pretty much paid off. I'd had my family when I was mid-30s, so sort of didn't take very much maternity leave. It wasn't as generous in those days as well. So I tried to.
And in the profession that you're in, I can imagine there's not really, you can go part-time sort of options.
You say that, Jane. Yeah, there is now. So we're talking now, my children were born at the end of the 1990s, so they're now early 20s and forging their own way. Neither of them wanted to become a lawyer. I put them off that, so job done there. But it wasn't generous, but I took some time off. I then did a job which was more consulting, sort of business development, marketing, but for lawyers, and did that when they were small. Then when my youngest was just maybe a year before starting school, circumstances at the time and moving to a different part of the country, and also missing the intellectual challenge of law, truth be told. I was working with these lawyers and they were the ones at the coalface doing the work for clients. I was helping them develop that. I thought, I do miss a bit of it. I worked in commercial and intellectual property law, which is actually quite creative because you're building relationships for clients. You know, you're not I'm just so totally opposite from the sort of the US typical screen lawyer who's in court fighting for their clients. I'm not a
Yes.
confrontational person at all. I like to build. And so I was building relationships with contracts that you didn't want to take to court because you wanted them to work. And intellectual property, you might know, is all about creativity. So working with artists in music, in technology increasingly, and writing as well. Some authors I worked for.
How interesting.
So interesting. So it was interesting. I met some amazing people, and looking back, worked for some incredible clients, some real name dropping. It was, but at the time, it wasn't a job that I loved. It was a job that I did because I started it. And so I kind of felt I should finish it. I nearly stepped away to teach law at one point, and then thought, no, I'll stick with it because the pay's there. And
And who was Kim at this point? Was Kim her job? Was there more
well,
to Kim?
funny you should say that, because again, it's only reflecting, having had that time away from it. And those close to me would say, at the time I said, no, but they would say, you are defined by your job. You see yourself as that lawyer. I wasn't a super confident lawyer, but I knew I could work a room for business development. I knew that people listened to me. I knew I could teach, because I did do quite a bit of teaching of other lawyers for technical updates, and then with clients for business. This is the new bit of law. This is how it affects your business. I liked that bit of it. But the actual law, I was probably quite bored with, to be honest, because, when you've done one contract, the same basic principles are the same, and the office politics and the backbite, it is a bit of a dog eat dog world. And there was a lot of, it's just so and so, that's just, they're a superstar biller, as in, they make lots of money for the firm, so they're allowed to behave in ways that aren't really that nice. A lot of change happened during my long career, I have to say. When I first started as a very young lawyer, you weren't allowed to wear trousers to court, seriously, or anywhere. It was just frowned upon. And then trouser suits came in, and now, of course, it's really dressed down. Unless you are in court, you just would wear, just this with a pair of trousers would be fine. You're not expected to wear a jacket. So there was a lot of change, And the mum was kind of like the next role, and the wife was the next role. So there wasn't really much time for me. I would go to uni classes, but I'd be the one that left the office last minute and rushed there and was cross because someone was on the place where I wanted to put my mat. I didn't really have much for me other than enjoying a bit of gardening.
Yeah, I can imagine that. So tell us a little bit about this passion, because it's passion for gardening. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you got started in the new field?
Yeah, lovely field, literally, because there were fields involved. So it was I'd always lived in a house with a garden. My parents weren't particularly, they'd mowed the grass and plant things, but they weren't passionate or interested in gardening. But we'd always had a garden in every house I grew up in. And I think it was more a case of just enjoying that. And then there was a big rebirth of gardening with programs like Gardener's World had always been really not something I would ever have chosen to watch. Somebody called Percy Thrower, that the younger listeners will never even have heard of Percy Thrower, but it was all very, men with pipes on their allotments. And then it became quite trendy, and people like Monty Don, who I absolutely adore, would come along. I got to find out about Chelsea, and that was going through the Chelsea Flower Show, which is a really big show every year. And there are lots of other Royal Horticultural Society ones. So it was very much gardening for the middle classes, to be honest. It was buying nice things in the garden centres. I love a garden centre.
Yes, and then me too.
Making sure
they're dangerous, aren't they? I love them.
Exactly. So I trained and studied in London early, and then left London, as lots of my friends and contemporaries did. So all of the houses post London had gardens. So I would nurture and do bits and pieces. I knew I loved looking after it and making it look beautiful. I wasn't that keen on growing stuff from seed. I love eating fresh veg, but I can happily leave that to other people.
Yes.
It was more the creating a beautiful environment, which is so good for our well-being, and green therapy has now become a real thing. I think I was doing it. And I think when I was beginning to create gardens and being able to take cuttings from other people's gardens, and a very dear friend of mine who's been a huge support over the years, that her career was in banking, and now she is an artist. Again, it's that sort of creativity that's locked inside a lot of us, and we don't realize it. I've still got in the garden in my house cuttings or that have grown into a plant which came from one of her gardens, and it came via a garden in Cornwall. So there's that longevity, which is great. So I'd always fancied doing it. I had on my bucket list for when I retired, among with other things, do a course which the Royal Horticultural Society run. It's called the Certificate in Practical Horticulture, Level 2. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody does Level 1, but Level 2. And it was part-time, 1 day a week at Sparsholt College, which is near Winchester. And that just seemed like a dream location because it's an outdoors college. So I just wanted to do that for the fun of it, really, as this is a topic that's quite interesting to me. It's a nice thing to do. And I want to hang out
at this point, were you working
No, I'd finished.
So this was after the kind of early retirement.
Yeah. And so in hindsight, if I'd done something like this while I was working, because I worked 4 days a week for quite a few years towards the end, instead of using that 5th day to do all the chores and all the errands and maybe have coffee with somebody so that I would be free at the weekends to take the children to rugby or to rowing or whatever, I should have invested in myself and done the course, but I didn't. I finished my legal job at the end of 2019, just before 2020. So actually from my bucket list of travel and do lots of things, the only few things I could do, one of them was this course.
Yeah.
And amazingly, they were still running it in person, and education was one of the few things that you were actually allowed to go and travel to. So on and off all that lockdown in 2020, I actually managed to escape my village, which felt quite claustrophobic, to go to drive in beautiful countryside through very quiet roads to this college, hang out with like-minded people, and learnt a lot. And it actually probably just validated a lot of the information that I already knew.
Yes.
I thought all the people on this course would be like me, ladies of a certain age and just dabbling in gardening. I was so wrong. There were about 15 of us. The course was a smaller class because of COVID. That was great. So, we've got a group. We've still got a WhatsApp group.
Really nice.
Nearly 3 years later, I'm seeing some of them to do a botanical drawing and art and watercolor class. It's
beautiful
therapy bonding experience between us. That's such strange, weird times in our lives because everyone was coping with their own COVID things, in their own households and families. So we came together, and it was just a really great experience learning from other people. The age range was from 20 to early 60s. The average age was probably 30, so younger than me. Made some great new friends across generations. And a lot of these people were already working in the gardening business. And that planted a seed, so to speak, pun intended, for me, because I thought, well, maybe I could do this. And there was one friend who said, well, yeah, I garden and I do these hours for these old ladies and this for this bit. And this is how I cost it. And so I kind of came away from there thinking, well, maybe I could, but I was quite enjoying lockdown, to be honest, because it was, I hadn't got the responsibility of managing lawyers who are high performance, high needy people at the best of times. I hadn't got to cope with a team who would have had home working alongside trying to get their school sorted for their children or looking after elderly relatives. I would have been managing a team that had I thought, wow, how lucky am I? Not, the world is in this awful position, but actually my children were safe, my family was safe. And I was in a village that was, I wasn't living in a high-rise flat in the middle of a city. I had access to green spaces. I could walk the dog every day. So I wasn't really looking for anything to do. But then having had a career in business and finance, I probably hadn't made quite the same decisions as I should have done around my financial future, and thought I do have to work, but it's not just for money. It's also for the self-esteem of working and having been out of work for a bit.
Do you think mental stimulation or, that routine?
Well, not so much mental stimulation, because I had I was overflowing with just like my head was buzzing with all of the work that I'd done as a lawyer. I wanted something that was much more practical and creative. So I worked in the local cafe in the village and still do voluntary work in a cafe now in the brilliantly named Garden Rooms Cafe. So, how fortuitous is that?
Yes, which is a wonderful pop-up cafe in Boscombe.
Yes, supporting the Bournemouth Food Bank. But the fact
Yes.
that I wanted to learn how to use a coffee machine, and I've got barista skills now, and I don't mind a bit of washing up, and will even clean the loos from time to time. I did that and loved it, and loved working with the customers. And then the gardening was something that actually a friend introduced me to another acquaintance, saying, Kim, you've done this course, you need a job. She is quite a forceful character, this person. So again, this was my people pleasing tendencies, and not being able to say, no, I'm happy with the cafe bit, I'll just see. She said, you need a job. This girl needs a gardener. So I'm going to put you
You've
together.
done your course.
Oh, you've done
Yeah.
the course. She needs a gardener. She doesn't really acknowledge she needs a gardener, but she does. So come around to my house at this time and I'll introduce you. And I just went with it. And I was grateful to the friend for doing that. And I thought, okay, well, I will do some hours for this. And I was thrown into it. And it was a challenge, but I thought, yeah, I'm up for that. And she really did need my help. And that was the start of what's now a friendship, actually, with the client, because she needed my help. We were at a similar life point, and she was working at home. So she was the isolation of not being in the office and mixing with the people she would normally be having her positive association with.
Oh, and we've just
Forward to coming on
lost
really.
Kim. Have we got you back again?
No,
Sorry,
I
Kim.
just not
You
that. All
froze.
right.
You froze
That's
slightly.
right. You froze on me. That's
Just in case Kim is not being recorded. I am just going to pop Kim off from the stream for 1 minute and just add her back. Hopefully, we have not lost connection. Oh dear. So, let's try one last time. Oh, and she's popped off. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Come back, Kim. Come back. All is forgiven. We want to hear the rest of your story. Please come back. I am just going to send a little message to Kim. And we will find out about her story. Because it's a fantastic story, and there are so many other women and men out there who start doing their passion projects, and they turn these passion projects into businesses. And we've got Kim back. Fantastic.
I'm back. What happened then? Right. So, yes, I think I was talking about yesterday. The next door neighbour then saw the amazing work I'd been doing in the woman who's now become a friend's garden, and said, okay, come around to do some for me. She was much more demanding. She was a lady of a certain age who knew what she wanted. It wasn't my taste in gardens, and was very kind of micromanaging. And yeah, I thought, she needs my help. I said yes. I paid, she paid me money for doing it.
Yeah.
But that was kind of not quite such a fulfilling experience. And
It
was that kind of, but I felt loyal towards her. She wanted my help, and I didn't look forward to going to her quite so much. But then it kind of expanded in other ways. It really did it was law of attraction. When I was looking at Nextdoor, the app which I use, I'm not on Facebook, incidentally, but it was Nextdoor. Somebody would say,
I know the Nextdoor app. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a really good place if you are in business and looking for local work. There was a really lovely ad from a couple who said, we've bought our cottage recently. We want to use local tradesmen, and so if you're able to help us design our borders, we don't want anything fancy. We don't want design exactly, but anybody who knows how to plant borders and help us choose those plants, love to hear from you. So I thought, oh, that's me. So that was the start of my sort of border creation or border design. So I didn't call myself a designer. And although, well-meaning people said, oh, you should go and do a course now and do a garden design course, you could earn lots more money doing that.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't want to do that and all the CAD design. I actually did my design by creating collages from
Oh,
plant
beautiful.
catalogues.
Yeah.
And people like Sarah Raven, so people that I would have bought plants from, and the Bloms bulbs, and I would cut out pictures, Blue Peter style. I always,
Nice.
one of my child, if I could have my life again, I would be a Blue Peter presenter. But it
You'd
was
be very good at that, Kim. Very
absolutely,
good.
because I was the era of John, Val, and Peter, so John Noakes, and
Yeah.
it was just a formative part of childhood because you didn't have anything else to watch. You came home and watched that on TV. So I did my cutout with my UPVC glue and stuck these pictures on, and then would take a scan of them and send them to the clients. And I costed it properly and well. Got
Mm-hmm.
ideas from the internet as to how you charge based on how big the plot was, a certain design.
Well done. Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
to all of that, I didn't know what I was doing because I'd not been in business before. But
But you took
I
steps
had that
to be informed and
exactly.
to,
And
yeah.
and I knew how much I was charged out as a lawyer, which was hundreds of pounds an hour. I knew how much I actually probably got in my pocket when I calculated how many hours I did, and thought, well, it's not going to be as much as that. But to be honest, it probably wasn't far off if you count all the hours that are never paid as overtime when you're a professional.
That's true. Yeah.
And then I knew for, doing tax and things that I could charge my mileage. So I made sure that I kept records of that and kept receipts for things that I bought. Never earned a huge amount, but I was doing it properly. Got a bank account that gave you an initial free banking and could do your invoices online. So rather than using a template, I then did that. And I loved it because it was like all new, shiny stuff. It was great.
Yes.
Plant nurseries, got trade card and felt like a proper tradie and had to go with my high-vis jacket on. Love a bit of high-vis.
Yes.
To go and select the plants for this planting project. And started an Instagram page for this. And then felt, yeah, that's great. I really like this. The work kept coming. Thought, okay, it still wasn't going to earn enough to make me. And I think that was the tipping point. I thought, I'm working all these hours. I'm making more than I'm making doing a couple of shifts, living wage.
At the cafe, maybe. Yeah.
It's still vastly removed from what I need to actually earn. I was breaking even, I suppose. I was earning enough to pay the bills, but there wasn't anything left over for special things or for savings. So I was using sort of the bonuses that I'd kind of accumulated, not a huge pot, but using that for okay, I want to go and see somebody else for the week or go away for the weekend. That would be the money that I was using. So I kind of suddenly had this feeling that it's not sustainable, and then got myself in a bit of a panic. But that's kind of like a little bit down the line. I should have seen the warning signs, really, I think, because as this work came in and accumulated, I found out about a free government-sponsored, business coaching, I suppose, for new businesses, and signed up for that. Was totally unimpressed with the guy who was leading it, and just kind of like couldn't get to grips with the spreadsheet. I couldn't do any cash flow forecasts because I didn't know how many customers I was planning to get. I wasn't really seeking it and trying to build that business. It was just, they were just happening to appear. So,
and I think when you get to a certain point, you then need, especially with gardening, I mean, there's only so many hours that you've got.
absolutely.
So therefore, then you need a team, don't you?
Yeah,
and
you
then
do
you
need
need
a team.
vehicles.
You do, and you need employment contracts, and you need different insurance, and you need proper equipment. So I was just using the gardening tools that I'd had myself accumulated over the years, and a few that had come down sort of through family. And the gardens that I went to were usually pretty well equipped, so I would use their equipment and tools. And I generally wouldn't cut grass because that is quite heavy, hard work. And there's loads of people that cut grass for next to nothing. Let them do that. I only did the grass for this one lady because my original client, because she wasn't able to use her mower. So I wanted to do that, but nobody else did. I did grass for.
It was borders, all flowers.
My absolute sweet spot is weeding. I love weeding. It's just making it. You can tell what you've done. It looks lovely. You can see I've done that section. And pruning, weeding and pruning, and generally looking after are my absolute favourite things. And it was really a case of, again, well-meaning, very well-meaning friends and people saying, you're doing so well, this is brilliant. So what you need to do now is scale your business. You want a nice young lad who can do all the heavy stuff and maybe some other people that can like replicate what you're doing and send them
Mhm.
out, and then you just go and do the costing and the nice little bits. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that,
It
and I
it
resisted.
snowballs then
Oh,
a little bit out of control
absolutely.
if you, one, don't
Yeah.
100% want to do it, but like you say, with employment
Mm.
nowadays, it's not simple. You've got
No.
to do pensions and
Hmm.
everything
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
people. It's a massive,
Yeah.
take,
It
isn't
is. It is. And it's also, the reliability of other people, because I knew I could rely on myself, even though I did have a little bit of a scare because I pulled a muscle or I hurt my foot in some way and I was limping for a little bit. I did nothing broken or anything,
it?
but couldn't garden for a few days. And then it was that sort of, okay, that
Did it
caused a little
dawn on you then with the
bit of
self-employed
panic
world?
phase again that, oh, when you're self-employed, if you don't show up, you don't get
You
paid.
don't
Now, the
get
clients were there
paid.
waiting for me. They were disappointed. I wasn't going to lose work, but I didn't have money in my pocket for those particular days. So again, that was
Yeah,
another little bit of, okay, this isn't fun anymore. It's now, it's now something that's
bit
causing
pressured.
me a bit of pressure and a bit of stress. And I could have had people, because I've since, some of the gardening I'm doing now is actually for another gardening business. And I send my invoice in for one day's work and get paid from when I turn up to when I finish. And
So
that
what
makes
was before
to
we go on to that part, what was the kind of tipping point
mm,
where, like, at first you thought, find a job you love and
yeah.
you'll never work a day in your
Hmm.
life, and you
Hmm.
were loving, enjoying,
Hmm.
you had like an ideal client, and
Yeah.
then the next client, not so
Hmm.
ideal, and
Hmm.
then the next and the next, and then you've got a mixed bag
Yeah.
really of clients.
Yeah.
You've got a much fuller diary. You've got a lot of admin on your
Hmm.
hands. And then you realize that when you're sick, you don't get any sick pay,
Hmm.
um, etc. When did you start to think, actually, this find a job you love and
Yeah.
you'll never do a day's work in your life is
Hmm.
not quite working out for me?
Yes. So I think it was probably, so the first year was just actually learning about the business and on the back end of having done the course. So it was kind of, oh, I can't do this. I've just got a level 2 certificate. I think, well, that's a lot more than a lot of gardeners. Of course you can. I think my old persona of, well, you have to be properly qualified to do this was hot
Yes,
back. And
lowering you.
exactly. But then thought, well, no. And I got insurance, yes, I can do this. Of course I can. Just go out and call yourself a gardener. You don't have to be any more qualified than, and actually I'm much more qualified than quite a few. So that's how I can charge what I charge. And
Mhm.
lady gardeners of a certain maturity are actually very well, you
They're
sort
sought after. Yeah.
after, especially for more elderly clients, because they want
Mhm.
that reliability and someone to have a chat with. And
Yes.
it was when I was having a chat and having a cup of tea with these people and realizing that I was then doing extra hours that I wasn't paid for because I felt I couldn't have a cup of tea on their time. Well, actually, I could because that's what they were paying me for. But I was then doing
Yes.
more work, then getting more tired.
I will
And
give you an example of
so,
this as well, to all those who are listening. One of my clients is a mobile therapist, and they obviously get paid for 1 hour
mm,
treatment. And I said, okay, so how long does 1 hour treatment actually take you? Oh my gosh, it was like all afternoon, not only driving there, the
mhm,
setup, then a good old chat because
yeah,
they've been my client for
mm,
2 years, 3 years, however many years. They expect that conversation at the start, at the end,
yeah,
and you're getting paid for 1 hour, and
mm,
actually it's taking 4 hours of your
yes,
time.
yeah,
It was
mm,
insane. I was
mm,
like, oh my gosh, we need to
yeah.
change this really
Yes, but
quickly.
it's really hard to change it if you have a
Yeah.
personality that doesn't like to say no, which was me at the time, and which,
Yes.
think, well, they are paying, at least they're paying me something. But it would be, I'd be sitting there, feeling very uncomfortable, feeling very anxious because I didn't really want to
Yes, you
be there.
start to feel anxious,
Yeah,
don't you? Yeah.
exactly. I didn't really want to be there, but and then thought, and now this is delaying. I always made sure that I didn't do too many jobs in a day. I would usually just do a morning or an afternoon, or well, mostly a morning, because of course the next thing was the weather. Now everyone thinks, oh, it's when it's cold and wet that's bad. No, when it's hot, and sunny, and I'm not a great one for the heat. So last summer,
Okay.
2022, was very hot and sunny. And although I was starting quite early, in fact, sometimes I would start really early to go and do some things, come back and have a break.
Mhm,
By the time you got to mid-morning, it was baking hot and
mhm.
it was hard. And I was quite lonely actually, because although you do have the chat with
Yeah.
the client, it's a very solitary job. You're not with a team of people.
And
And
I think that actually must be quite difficult throughout the summer
mm,
months because people aren't really going to want you in their gardens in the
no,
evening or
no,
particularly early morning. I hadn't even
no,
thought of that.
no, exactly. So that I had to work. I didn't have to work my hours around them, but even getting there for like an 8 o'clock, 8:30 start, because I had to walk. I had to get myself up, walk the dog, because I had a dog
Mhm,
at the time, work out how long I could leave him for. It was because it just made it that bit harder. And then it was kind of
mm.
like another recommendation came through. I thought, well, this is a friend of somebody who I've been referred to, and then other tradesmen. So the people who did the grass, so to speak, the
Oh,
grass
yeah.
and the heavy stuff, the blokes in their white van who, salt of the earth people would say, well, I don't do the Ponzi garden stuff, but I know a lovely lady who does. Give him
Mhm.
a ring. And then I was getting referrals, so felt a loyalty to the people who'd put my name forward
Yeah.
to their clients to refer. So found myself taking on more. And then I'd sworn I wouldn't ever do a pub garden. I found myself doing a pub garden. You know,
So your
it's
boundaries
yeah, my
were
boundaries were
totally
non-existent,
non-existent. I was gonna say
non-existent,
skew with, but
non-existent.
totally
Yeah,
non-existent.
and the ironic thing is I was listening because my kids had given me some headphones so that I could listen to podcasts. I was listening to podcasts about boundaries, about, making sure that you don't that you don't allow people to overstep those boundaries, to look after yourself first. I was listening to all of this, and it was obviously going in one
But
ear
then
and out the
so
other
so it
while I was
wasn't, it
gardening.
wasn't it was planting
It
seeds. It
was.
was planting seeds
It
because
was.
you
Mm,
realized, didn't you?
yeah.
You realized that your passion had turned
Mm.
into a prison.
It had, yeah. And my own garden that I had loved and cherished didn't get a look in because I didn't get a
Mm.
chance to do my garden. I would occasionally sit in it in the evening, but I was usually too exhausted to sit and really enjoy it. And I looked at it and it wasn't as lovely as it had been, shall we say, because
Yes.
I hadn't any time at all to look after my own garden. And so I was looking at other people's in a very different light, thinking, well, I wouldn't do it. I'd like to do my own right now, but I can't because I'm doing yours because I said I would. You're my
Mm.
client. I have to turn up and being micromanaged by you, because the worst words in the world were, well, you're the expert, they would say to me, and then
And
proceed to tell
then
me what what I was doing wrong or what they wanted, because it wasn't quite how they wanted it, especially the older clients who clearly loved their gardens and clearly had been active gardeners, but age or infirmity
yes.
wasn't allowing them to do it anymore. So I think from my own point of view, it did open up a sort of empathy in me and a realization that that might be me one day. And so being a bit more tolerant and kind, but even so, it was hard at the time, because I'm not your servant, I'm not your employee. I know you're paying me, but I do know
Mm.
what I'm doing. And then, yeah, being managed in that way just was, the finals, one of the finals. There was lots of little things, really, I think that.
Lots of little things, but the straw that broke the camel's back.
Mm,
So when did you decide that the business wasn't for you
yeah,
anymore?
well, I think only recently, to be honest. So I'd had
Mhm.
this summer when I'd been working really hard. I hadn't got to go to the beach or any of the things that I really want to do. I'd come down to Southbourne occasionally to see my when my daughter was staying there, and we'd go and do yoga on the beach and things. And so I think I'd realised that I'd been missing out on stuff, and it was also a sense of just the time in my life that I'd stayed put. I tried to develop something new, but a bit of me was still really rooted in an old place in a way. It was the place where my family had grown up and I'd been working there. I hadn't spent much time in the village because I'd got in my car and driven to Southampton for the day and then come back in the evening. So I was kind of trying
Yes.
to build a different social life, but I wasn't doing that because I was gardening all the time. So I just thought,
Yeah.
right, just I need to take myself out of this environment. It was still not really the time to go traveling, and I was too anxious and exhausted to go traveling, to the other side of the world or even to the other side of the country. I thought,
Yeah.
okay, it's just down the road. I'll go and do a winter let in Southbourne. I rented my house out with the garden that is a mess, was a mess and still is a mess, but I'm going to tidy that up this summer when the tenants have gone. So it was a sense of, I need to take myself out of this and just think about lots of things. So the gardening and the business was one element, but I mentioned children having grown up. It's all the classic things really, and
Yeah.
in relationships. And I thought, I just need to be somewhere different. Everybody says, how great the sea is. And I stood there and thought, it took me a long time to actually, and finding your group, finding groups of people, one of
Yes,
which was
Kim
how I
comes
found you.
to the Mindful Meanders on a Monday and a Friday,
Yeah. So
which is
through,
my community group. Yeah.
so that was one. I tried lots of different things, and it was really very recently, and I think it probably was the the emergence of all the new little life and spring and bulbs coming up, and that sense that the awful, it felt a really long January in particular, long and wet, and I wasn't really, because I'd said to my clients, a lot of them wouldn't want to pay me in the winter anyway, to be fair. It's because they didn't
So
see
again, then it's seasonal,
it was
isn't
seasonal,
it?
exactly,
So
with the type of
encourage the
clients I
money in
had.
the yeah.
Yeah, there's always something to do in a garden, but they didn't see that in the wintertime. They kind of thought, well, I don't want to pay her just to do stuff that's not going to have quite the same effect. So I kind of said, I'll be back. And very recently thought, do you know what? I won't be. I'm going to come back to Downton because I've got a house there, and it's, I've got friends there, but I'm ultimately not my future, but for now, I like living here. I'm going to spend this summer here. It's too far to do that on a regular basis. I hope none of my clients hear this or see this interview before I've actually told them in person, but I'm about to say, I'm not going to be able to work for you anymore. And it took me a long time to be able to say that, because I felt obliged, because I'd said I was going to do it. I said I was going to come back and work for them. And now I'm not, because I've actually looked at what I want to do, and that doesn't fit into what I want to do right now. I want to have my own pots. I've got a garden where I'm going to be living, but I'm not going to be planting in it because it's not necessarily long term, but have pots that I can look after, possibly doing some contracting garden work, but not having the responsibility for it, just being able to turn up and do it for somebody else. Yeah, and doing it with somebody else, because when I do that work, I've got a buddy in the van with me and we go and garden together, and it's, again, having a great conversation with positive, like-minded people all day. And it's just a very different way of doing it. And it makes me feel really happy again that I can have that as part of my life and be able to turn down any opportunities. So no, I don't want any clients as a result of talking to you today, Jane. It's just very...
We are not advertising or
No,
marketing a
don't want
business here
any.
today in
No,
this
don't want any.
interview.
You can have a look at what I did, but I don't want any new now. And it has been part of that kind of realization that's helped me look at other areas of my life and look at boundaries in particular, but also, what I know are my people-pleasing tendencies and being able to say no to things. And it's just makes me a much more... it's acceptance. You use, that kind of word of, I don't have to do something because I started it. It's you've started, so you'll finish. You can quit, and you're not a loser because you quit. You can turn things into slightly different things. I'm always going to, love Japanese gardening tools, but as objects, I know now that I've unlocked a creativity inside me that I didn't ever think I really had, because I, being the studious grammar school girl, didn't do art, or I played an instrument, but played in the orchestra because that was the
done thing.
But now I'm singing, so I'm a member of a community choir, and it's just such a, all these creative things are being unlocked, and in the way in which I'm now just associating with positive people that I would never have crossed paths with before. And having that business experience has just enriched the way that I'm looking at other people, businesses really, I think, and asking, maybe searching questions of them. And it's it's been a very important part of the last few years for me.
So in hindsight, do you have any advice or top tips for our audience? And I'm not talking about gardening. I'm
Mm,
talking about this. Find a job you love
yeah,
and you'll never do a day's work in your life.
exactly. So I think one of the things, if you're like me and you sort of come to the end of a long career and you've really just got one track that you've been down, make sure and do this in good time before you decide to stop doing that, that you are filling your life with other things, which may be a passion
Mhm.
or may not. It doesn't really matter, but do make sure that you're developing things that are for you and time for yourself. And that's so
Mhm.
hard as a working woman, as a wife and a mother. And I'm sure, men might say, well, it's hard for us as well. But I think as a woman, you do tend to just take it all on yourself and put yourself last. So finding
Mhm.
something, if I'd started the gardening side, maybe I would have gone into gardening design or something which wasn't so physically exhausting and mentally lonely, because I would be managing a team of people. I might have felt very differently about having a business that I could then scale, because I'd already have covered some of that ground and seen, the benefits and what it could be. So
Yeah.
I think I think that's probably, don't just step off as I did and wait for something to happen. Although
Yeah.
it's turned out all right in the end, but it was quite a stressful time. If I'd really wanted to, if I really had needed to survive on that income, I would have, yeah, it would have been very, very hard. So I think that's probably one of the key things. And as to whether it's a passion, don't be swayed by other people into what you think. Because people would say, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're doing gardening and you love gardening, and I'd much rather be doing that than sitting in my office." And don't, listen to your gut. And just because you
Mm.
like something doesn't mean it's a passion. Passion is a very misused word, I think. Be very aware of the fundamentals of business planning and, how are you going to fund it? I should have thought about, if I'm going to do it properly, I will probably need some tools that aren't, 50 years old, or what would I need? And then the costs of that, and how do you take it? As it was,
Yeah.
it was not a hobby job. It was more than a hobby job, because I was earning money, paying tax on it, living off
Mhm.
it, and it felt good doing that. It gave me purpose. So I think it's getting out of it what you want. And if there is something that is your passion, I'm sure some people can turn it into a business, but just to
Yeah.
be aware that once you're charging for it and you're selling your time doing it, unless you've put the right structure around yourself, it could very easily just turn you off that thing that was really the heart and soul of what you want to do.
Yeah, planning is a big is a very important
Mm.
thing because you can get yourself into all sorts of pickles
Mhm.
when you don't plan. But
Mm.
when you are able to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture and look at what the future would look like and help plan these things out, you can stop things in advance, stop the pain,
Mm. Yes.
um, or
Yeah.
help deviate and go, Actually, let's go this route. It's going to be
Mm.
a much better option."
Yeah. I think it's having that happy medium. I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not a plan. I don't plan, which is, considering the career that I had,
Yeah.
I'm not a great one for planning. But equally, I always like to have an idea of where I'm going to end up. And so I
Mhm.
think if I'd put the two together in a more thought, I don't know, more constructive way, I suppose, then it would be the best, because you do need to be able to be spontaneous as well. And I think
Yes.
I was a very risk averse person. I mean, as a lawyer, most of us are, really, because that is the job, to minimize risk for your clients. And so I was very risk averse. And I think now the experience has allowed me to just think differently about other things in my life and say yes to things.
I always say plan and put your structure in, but
Mm.
use like bamboo structure that's
Mm.
flexible,
Yes.
pliable,
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than your
Got
steel
to stick to it. And
construction, rigid,
yeah. But I
and then
agree
you're
with
in your
you.
prison.
Yeah, and I don't think that was me, because I didn't have that plan for the future. I walked away
Yeah.
from the course that was the spreadsheet, because I couldn't think beyond like a couple of months. Well, I've got this client and this one, and I suppose I
Yeah,
could
you
do
just
the same.
totally were
I just
in the
totally
moment
went
and
with
went
the
with the flow.
organically. So it grew
Yeah,
organically, and
yeah,
I could have
fantastic.
done. People saying, "This is amazing. You've done this without even trying. You could do so much more." And I kept having to justify myself as to why I didn't want to do more. I think, it is the never, you don't have to explain. Just say, no, I'm happy doing this. I'm happy cutting out the pictures and sticking them onto a bit of paper. I've still got all of those and got
That's
pictures of them.
beautiful.
And there are some on the Instagram account that I'm very happy. It's not a lot on there because I'm not going to do any more for the moment.
No.
But it's a little tiny bit of my history, my story of my business, and I'm very proud of it. I came up with the name, so the creativity, the name borders Bespoke. So like the alliterative, but it was.
Yes.
I'm very, very proud of it and of what I did. But yeah, that's sort of, we talked about an adage at the beginning. It's that same one that fail to plan to fail, or the other way around.
Yes.
Whichever way around it is. I kept telling myself that when I was feeling really stressed about, but I've got this, I've got to do this. I haven't got to do this business. Just, allow it to just be dormant. It's just having a rest.
And it's okay. It's okay to let
It's
go,
okay to
isn't
do
it?
that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kim, for joining us, telling us about your story, and how finding a job you love
Yeah.
and you'll never do a day's work in your life isn't necessarily true
For everyone. No.
for
No.
everyone.
Well,
Yes.
thank you very much, Jane, for the opportunity of sharing that with you. I've loved
My
it.
absolute pleasure. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Stay Sane with Jane, the show that helps you and your business to thrive, not just survive. Tune in each week as Jane connects with guests in the wellness, business and publishing worlds, bringing you the most up-to-date training, techniques, healing and guidance for growth, mindset and motivation. Each session includes a magical guided meditation led by Jane or one of her special guests. And we are into that section right now. My name is Jane Scanlan and I'm going to be taking you through the Minditation, which is a combination of meditation and mindfulness. Okay, so everybody, if you are able, take a nice cozy seat or lie down and take a deep breath in. Today we're going to be tuning in to the power of acceptance. So what does acceptance mean to you? I'll take you through this guided meditation. So let's bring kind awareness to what this topic means to you and how it makes your belly, chest and head feel when you reflect on the power of acceptance. Bring awareness to the emotions that are bubbling up now as we tune into the power of acceptance. And just remember that there are many others out there feeling similarly about this topic as you. So find a comfortable seat where you can be relatively free from distractions. And if you are driving or operating machinery, then obviously do not go into a meditative state listening to this. Maybe right now isn't the right time to listen. So find a balance between sitting up nice and tall and remaining relaxed. Feel into the width of your chest as you soften your shoulders down and back. Rest your palms face up on your thighs or in a manner that's most comfortable for you. Close your eyes or gaze low at the ground ahead of you and breathe in and out through your nose. Choose a breath that reflects all of the qualities you desire in your mind. Gentle, quiet, patient, steady, spacious, and at ease. Balance your awareness between the 3 spheres of mindfulness: your body, your breath, and the mind itself. Stay present right here with all 3. Perhaps 20% of your mind's attention on each, and the remaining 40, just let this part of your mind stay with the spaciousness and the ease. Don't get caught up with those numbers. The idea is just to be mindful and at the same time free. Seated, breathing, present the body, the breath, and the mind. Present, aware, open, and spacious. And now notice what's present here with you. Notice if there's any sensations arising in the body. An energy that you can sense through the breath, or a movement, emotion, or habitual thought in the mind. Whatever it is you notice, welcome it in and welcome it into the spaciousness. Just allow it to be. Don't try to change it. Don't chase it. Don't try to push it away. Can you remain still and spacious in your awareness as you accept what it is that's rising? This is how things are, right here, right now. Notice how it is and accept it. Recall that acceptance is spacious, non-judgmental, and unattached. To accept is not an endorsement. To accept is not an opinion. To accept is simply to recognize, to notice. Acceptance is mindfulness and awareness of reality as it is. And what about now? What's present here with you now? What's arising in the body? What can you sense through the breath? Is there stillness or movement in the mind? This is how things are right here, right now. Notice how it is. Accept it. And recall that, like all things, it will also change. In your acceptance, you give what it is that you notice the freedom to change. When you and reality are no longer battling. Reality no longer has to defend itself. Let's give thanks to your acceptance. There can be a softening, there can be a movement, there can be a change. So what about now? What's present with you right here and right now? Accept all sensations that are rising in the body. Welcome it in. Give it space. Give it freedom. What type of energy do you sense through the breath? Welcome it all in. Watch it and notice it with curiosity. Is there stillness or movement in the mind? Welcome it and accept it without attaching, without trying to push it away. This is how things are, right here, right now. Notice, welcome, accept. Sense the whole body, the breath, and the mind itself, opening into the freedom of acceptance. Nothing needs to be different right now. This is how it is. And from the spaciousness of acceptance, tap into the wisdom that acceptance provides. From the spaciousness of acceptance, from this awareness of things as they are, take a nice deep breath in and place a smile upon your face at this new level of mindfulness and awareness called acceptance. Now, before you open your eyes and go about your day-to-day life, just connect to the wisdom in your body, your breath, and your mind. And ask your body itself the question, what should I do now? Be equally accepting of the answer. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jane Scanlan, and you've been listening to the Meditation Sessions and the Stay Sane with Jane radio show. Stay Sane with Jane, the show that helps you and your business to thrive, not just survive. Tune in each week as Jane connects with guests in the wellness, business and publishing worlds, bringing you the most up-to-date training, techniques, healing and guidance for growth, mindset and motivation. Each session includes a magical guided meditation led by Jane or one of her special guests.